I am pro-choice for many different reasons. It's not that I despise anyone who's pro-life. I think they just don't understand what the underlying problem is. And I think that as a nation, we need to discuss these problems because so far they were just so ugly that we kind of just pretended that they weren't there and lived in this fantasy world that we can keep multiplying and that there will always be food and there will always be housing and there will always be land available to our children and our children's children. And the reality is that there isn't going to be. Putting aside global warming or any other issues that may be going on and just focusing on population, the minute I say we're overpopulated as a race and as a species, is a better word, people immediately will kind of look around and say, well, I live out in the country, there's no one for miles, or I live where there was a ton of foreclosures and all these buildings are vacant. There's plenty of room. But the reality is that, first of all, what a shame it would be if we waited until every inch of the planet was covered by a major city to say, hold on, I think we're overpopulated. That would be just so devastating and so extreme. We certainly don't want to wait until it gets to that point. So how do you know that you're there before you see it? Just look at our food supply. If you remove any farm-raised animals, for instance, which means that the major supermarkets will have really no supply, that's how you know. When you think to yourself, if I had to go into the wilderness, if we had to get our food from the natural world around us, would there be enough? And the answer is a definitely no. There isn't enough to go around. The animals compete amongst themselves hard enough. Adding us to that equation would completely collapse the ecosystem. We're just too much of a volume to throw out into the natural world. There's just too many of us. So a lot of the problems that we have with our food supply have to do with the fact that we make it happen. It doesn't happen naturally. We force it. We command a supply because we need the supply. And that's where you get into the biologically engineered produce and the hormones in livestock to help meet the demands. It's not that the farmers are evil or that, people in general are evil. It's just that when you're in a desperate situation, you tend to make choices that you normally wouldn't make. And I think that we're in a desperate situation. I think we're at that point where people like myself look around and say, well, what's going on here? Why does it have to be this way? It wasn't always like this. And what can we do to go back to the way it was as far as sustainability? And it's also a major factor as far as overpopulation when you do take that road, because that's when you realize, well, I don't really want that engineered produce. I want something else. And then you look around and say, well, it's really expensive and there really isn't much of it. And that's when you really realize there isn't enough to go around. And when you factor in a lot of, and I don't want to call it irresponsibility, even though I lack a better word, but so many of us are reproducing at a rate that doesn't make any sense. We need to realize that we are not a prey animal. We're predators. And predators' numbers need to stay in check. If there are too much of us, which there already are, we can't collapse the entire system. And nature's natural alternative is unfortunately starvation, and we have done our very best to avoid it, but it's already in effect. There are plenty of people around the world, including this country, that are at that state, that are in starvation, and there are people who are clinging on to welfare and systems like that to try and avoid it. And it's so sad to see that happen, because as intelligent as we are, our problems are just so simple and so animalistic. The rampant deer in Connecticut have the same problem we do, and it just doesn't make any sense how we could be so intelligent and think to ourselves, oh, we're so much better, and yet we have the same problems. Except for the fact that the deer don't have condoms, and the deer don't have birth control, and the deer don't have abortion options. When they get pregnant, they full hold term, then the only chance of keeping their numbers down is if something comes and eats them. And it's really grim, because we don't want to think of ourselves as being in that position. But it will get to that point if we don't stop the madness, if we don't stop and think and be responsible and say, well, I can't afford to have a child, and what am I going to do if it happens? What are the next recourses? And for those of you who say abstinence, I think that you're again avoiding the reality. I think that anyone who says that word as a response, you need to reserve it for yourself, because it's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. And it's not that I'm attacking you personally, that I think you're not intelligent, because it's not true. The fact of the matter is that whatever answers we throw out there, they need to work for the masses, or at least the majority. And abstinence just doesn't. There's no way of controlling it without complete misery. I mean, they would have to be cameras everywhere. It would have to be a major government involvement, and we don't want any of that. So there's no easy way to control that. The only other thing we can do is through education, which we've been doing, maybe not 100%, but we've been doing it. I think our school system needs more. It really does. We need to really let our kids know what will really happen and treat them like adults, because I think too much they see the sex ed class as a joke or just an awkward class that they have to take, and they really don't soak it in. They really don't realize how real it is. And I think that's what we need to do, is I think we need to make things more realistic and say, listen, there are 16-year-old parents. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And think about how that ruins your adult life psychologically and as a member of society, and it's really sad. So we really need to think about what else can we do? Is there any other way other than abstinence to fix this problem? I myself rely on the birth control pill. For me, it works. I understand it doesn't work for everyone. I'm one of those odd cases where the extra hormone actually does me some good. For once in my life, after taking it, I actually had a normal cycle. Before that, it was very painful and abnormal, not what it should be. So for people like myself, it's a good thing. But I understand that's not the case for everyone. So there needs to be some other device, some other way that we can say, okay, every fertile female, and we're talking probably about the age of 14, could have this device. And I'm saying device because I'm immediately thinking of an object like Marina or something like that. Not saying that that's the answer, but it's the closest thing I can think of. But we would have to think of maybe if there's something better, but some way of giving our girls that option, because controlling the males may be more difficult. I think it's easier to control the female body, just because that's the end result. And if you can stop it there, I think we have a better chance. And I can't understand how we would even control the male body without serious infiltration of security and privacy. So that's the only option I can think of, a way of keeping our girls from getting pregnant at a young age, And then when they become of age, giving them the ability to make their choice. Are you going to go on to college, or are you going to settle down and have a family? And if you're going to settle down, do you have all your ducks in a row? Do you have a financial system in place? And if you don't, well, that's the reality of being an adult. And that's really what it is that I'm not preaching abortion because, we never want that to ever be the answer. But sometimes it's the only answer, and it's unfortunate. And I think that we need to have something in place so that never has to happen. And that's really what we need to work on. And I think if our population is under control, I think everything else will come into play. At that point, the food supply wouldn't be a problem. Global warming wouldn't be a problem. There are just so many other things regarding pollution and just our impact globally that would reduce significantly. And I think that mentally for ourselves, I think we would have a better peace of mind because we all agree that when there's less of us and less mouths to feed and less handouts to give out, we seem to be at a better state of mind. I visited the city the other day and I immediately felt stressed. Again, going back to what we are as predatory animals, we don't necessarily want to see too many of ourselves. Deep down, instinctively, it makes us believe there isn't enough to go around. We're just not meant to take that in, and we force ourselves to, which is why we have so many problems with stress and suicide in certain cities around the world. And I think it's our numbers. If we can bring them down, and it'll take a long time, we're talking about many generations. It's the only way if you want it to be somewhat painless, really. Without a war, without massive deaths, it's really the only way to do it safely. We just need to figure out exactly how we're going to go about doing it.